Won last night, and we just played them a few weeks ago. Good team, veteran team, and obviously their ability to score inside out was certainly a factor in game one. As far as updates on our team, nothing more outside of what I said on the radio show. Zed had a successful surgery, and that 6-month recovery started last week. So he had good, successful surgery.
With Zed and playing without him, you've talked about how the offense has flowed better, looked better, and I know the offense looked really well when he was healthy. But in hindsight now, like the way that the offense kind of moved when he was dealing with that shoulder injury, like how do you kind of evaluate like what he battled through and what the offense struggled with when he was injured versus not having him now?
Well, I think you look back on it and his inability to just play the way that makes him most effective, and his fitness level, which I think dropped, whether it was the brace or whether it was just, I think his fitness level really impacted things. So I think it wasn't just about his offense, it was about his overall play. Struggled with the injury, and then obviously that was when our team was struggling the most. So, outside of maybe making the change earlier than what we did, I'm not sure that there's, he wanted to battle through it, and we allowed him to do that and wanted him to until he just couldn't do it anymore.
Because looking at like 2-point field goal percentage, something we've talked about a lot this season, because the last 4 games you're above 50%, which is the longest stretch you've had this season. So what have you liked about the way you've been able to share the ball, and is some of that a result of not trying to get it into a guy who's got a shoulder injury in the post?
I think that's a part of it, Adam. I do think that is a part of it. I wouldn't say that's the most significant reason for our offense being so effective here the last few games. I think the most effective reason has been our movement and our ball movement and us trusting the pass more and just playing. We have played, really, really good offensive basketball this last stretch. We've moved it. We've also made some shots. You had some guys that maybe were struggling to not make open looks that are now making open looks. So you have guys playing with a lot of confidence right now offensively. But the biggest factor, I think, has been our ball movement and trust in the pass more than what we were during that stretch. But the issue in terms of force feeding maybe Zed when he was struggling, it's probably a part of it.
Coach, you talked about the smaller lineup and everything like that helping you guys out. And I know you just said that wasn't, it's not the entire reason for improvement here recently, but do you think that could help you even more and pay off even more in a setting like this where you have to play, day after day? You're focused on winning the first one first, but if you do get some wins to that tournament, could that be even more beneficial?
Well, yeah, I just think right now it gives us the best chance to win is playing with a little bit more mobility and speed. Now that'll be tested against Wisconsin because they're interior guys. They play kind of 2 post guys, even though Wall's a forward that can guard really 1 through 5. His ability to really hurt you in the post, and then obviously their center does a terrific job scoring. So, that'll get tested in this particular game for sure. But I do think it just makes us a little more active. We saw it against Michigan State, some just having Gene's versatility, and we're just more athletic. We move better with that group.
You talked on the radio about Dwayne setting the tone for you guys a couple of years ago with the run to the title game. Anyone in particular that you could envision kind of setting the tone, or that you want to see set the tone in this tournament run here?
Well, I wouldn't want to pick one particular guy. I think I have to go back and look. I can't remember if Dwayne was really playing well leading up to that stretch or not. To be honest with you, I just think he caught fire. We had a number of guys that were playing well in that stretch, but Dwayne kind of took it to another level. I think anytime you have a guy that has the ability to kind of get hot and score it like that, sometimes these tournament settings can be moments where they really kind of break out, and he did.
Chris, the flip side of the smaller lineup, bigger lineup, I'm just wondering, in your mind, what does the fully developed Felix Okpara look like? And maybe the second part of that is, what does the 5 in today's college basketball have to do and do really well to always be out there on the floor for you?
Defend ball screens. You know, I think he's got to be able to really defend ball screens, be able to move his feet, and have the necessary size to do that. I think that's probably as important as anything. I think protect the rim is another thing, and Felix can clearly do both those things. You know, you have unique centers in the Big Ten, like Edey, who is a legitimate low post, you know, incredibly dominant player. But you also have a guy like the Northwestern center who doesn't score at all, but he's 7 feet and can move and can defend ball screens and hedge ball screens and protects the rim and plays with great athleticism and was on their team for a number of years, just didn't play. And now he's really developed into an effective player for them. So I think Felix has to grow into what he can do at a high level. And I think that's going to be the challenge for him in the offseason. I've talked about we're going to play, you know, those two guys together next year. We will play bigger at times. But I think what we've seen with Felix is he's just scratching the surface. He had a jump hook over his left shoulder, oversized in the Michigan State game. Can he do that consistently right now? I'm not sure if he can do it consistently because of his lack of strength, but he does have really good touch in those moves, and I think he's just scratching the surface on that.
In the future, though, you mentioned this with Zed last year. I remember talking to you going into where you wanted him to develop this year. Even with Felix, though, do you want all these guys to be able to spot up, shoot?
Well, I want them to if they can make it consistently, and that's something that in the offseason they should spend consistent. Really, any big guy right now should be working on that. Now, you know, Dickinson didn't shoot it his freshman year, but he did his last couple. He has his last couple years. Caleb didn't shoot much his first year, but he did the last couple years. Again, it opens the basket, it allows teams to have a 5-out look offensively, which is so critical in today's game. So, is it something that we're going to work on and help add to his game? Absolutely, and he's got to prove that he consistently can make it. And, you know, I think at some point he will.
Chris, you mentioned how on your radio show that Bryce is really playing his best basketball probably all year, the last couple of weeks. And you talk about trusting the pass. How much has he been part of that trusting the pass? I know he's had 2 or more assists in the last 6 games.
I think what I said was he's played his best offensive basketball when you consider defenses adjusting to him, throwing more coverages at him, maybe him not, and we didn't maybe help him enough respond the right way during that stretch. Now he's just trusting things more and has made some really good reads. That's why I think offensively he's played, when you add the dynamics of, okay, now teams are playing him differently. Now he's reading those things and making he's still, you know, I think first couple minutes of the game the other day wasn't great, but after that, I thought he's played his best offensive basketball of the year, and I'm really proud of him for that.
And then for Bruce, it seems like he's always been able to find his spots, but on the catch and shoot, he seemed especially effective the last few weeks. Is that the kind of player you always expected for him to be that good on the catch and shoot?
Well, we always thought he could shoot it, and he had some struggles there in the middle of the year, but we always thought he could shoot it. And now I think what he's got to add is the ability to catch and shoot. And you know, we tell our guys, and I've stole this, most times the most open you'll be is on the catch, and he's done a better job of being ready on the catch to shoot it. I think he's read closeouts better, Bruce. Now he's got to continue to add the ability to shoot it behind ball screens when teams go under or when teams are in drop coverage, and he did that the other day.
I want to go back because the batteries do work now. Felix, a couple of the games have come down to the last few plays, and Felix hasn't been on the court. Penn State in particular, Pickett was able to get into the lane. Is it a trade-off? Obviously, you're worried about who can he guard in those situations if those teams go small, but in the situation you're in, you can't allow him to score again. Maybe he takes away 1 or 2 of his easy baskets at the hoop. Just your thought about maybe mixing him in at the end of games to deter the points in the paint that have kind of stung you in a couple of these recent losses.
Yeah, no, I think in that particular situation there just wasn't a great matchup, and they were playing 5 guards. Now I do think Felix is going to get to the point, Steve, where he's going to be able to take away opponents. It's going to be a little bit. It's going to be a lot of individual work in terms of guarding, but there is going to be a point where Felix is going to be able to guard a smaller guy, take away his rhythm catch and shoot 3, and at the same time be able to take away his penetration either by a chase down at the rim. He's just not there yet, Steve. And we've seen it too many times in games where, who gets straight line driven, come out of his stance off of a shot fake, or lose his man on the perimeter. And it's not the young man's fault. He's never had to guard a 6'4", 230-pound, multi-dimensional offensive player out on the floor. That's not his fault. We got to get him there because, to your point, if you do have him on the floor, he can impact things with his length, even if they try to pull him away from the basket. But he's just not quite there yet.
Sticking with Felix, when you have a guy that you've mentioned a couple times needs to stay out of foul trouble, I know he's been better about that.
Yeah.
What do you work on with, especially a big guy who's going to try and block shots, to avoid that as he gets older and on the court?
Yeah, it's some really good plays in the Maryland game where he was the second off the floor, and when guys were trying to get him off his feet, and he read the situation really well, read the player's hips, and I think as much as anything, you're just trying to emphasize that, and it's a lot of individual work. It's a lot of one-on-one work. It's having him guard mismatch situations as well as guarding the post. His post defense is really going to get challenged in this particular game, so we'll need some good one-on-one work in the next couple of days with that.
And his strength in the offseason, what is that kind of program?
It's going to be as critical as anything for him. I said on the radio 10 or 15 pounds of muscle. I'm not sure it's 15 pounds of muscle, but I think it's certainly, in the 10-pound range. He just has to get stronger. His legs have to get stronger. His base and core has to get stronger, and his upper body as well. But really his base and his core have to get stronger. And I really believe he's got the frame that can do it for sure.
As a team, you guys have often been coming into this tournament setting, knowing what you're, sort of what lies ahead. Now you're playing to get in. How does that change your message as a coach? Does it change your message at all in terms of how you handle this week with the guys?
I think there's obviously there's always urgency in these settings, but there's obviously great urgency. I think the focus is, as much as anything, is you're trying to focus on those things that you've done well and not come off of that, messaging in terms of what have we done well here and what do we need to continue to grow in. That's as important as anything here as we head into it.
Chris, I asked you about Justice a couple weeks ago, I think, and we were talking about the last full season he played for you guys when he was sort of the third option behind EJ and Dwayne. And he's playing well lately. Do you think Bruce's emergence as a scorer might have anything to do with that? Perhaps Justice feels a little bit more comfortable on that end of the floor if Bryce and Bruce are carrying more of that scoring load and not so much as on Justice's shoulders to score?
Maybe. I think it'd be an interesting question to ask him. I think what he's done, last game was a great example, Bill, of just almost a triple-double, 10, 9, and 7. That's always kind of what Justice has done when he's been on good teams, is he's been able to just be that guy. And I don't think he's ever necessarily been defined, although maybe he was at Cal, about just his scoring production. But I think when people look at him as playing his best, it's games like that. And maybe the emergence of Bruce has helped that. Maybe he's just in a better place mentally, I'm not sure, but he's certainly playing well.
Chris, you touched on this a little bit during your radio show. With Maui, you said it was kind of more of a fun atmosphere a little bit earlier in the season. But are there things you can take away, maybe playing X number of games in X days, stuff that you could take away from it that maybe would be valuable coming up this week?
I think that setting is valuable just in general, knowing you're going to be in a tournament setting. It's different here. Obviously, it's win or go home. So I think there is a suddenness to that where there's not in those settings. But still, you're playing with a bunch of other teams that are there, same hotels. You're watching other teams play. It's a really exciting environment. So I do think there's elements of it that can be helpful.
Chris, I'm just curious, just with how long you've been in the game, are you more of a regular season guy, or where do you view like the place of the conference tournament in general, in between the big dance?
Yeah, my understanding, Timmy, is when this thing, went to a tournament, I think that some of the coaches were against it, if my memory serves me, based on what I've heard. And I understand that because I think it's harder to win a regular season than it is a conference tournament. But both have, obviously great value. And then for a lot of teams, as we have been in the past, it is quickly, whether you win or you lose, it's quickly move on to what's next in terms of the NCAA tournament. So, but I don't know if there's a greater accomplishment than a regular season title.
Finish up with that. Obviously, the rotation is giving you some pretty good things right now, and you feel pretty settled with that. I have a lot of fans that keep asking me about Tanner Holtmann and his role in the team this season. I just wonder what you're challenging him with in practice to try to help you guys along, whether he's playing in the games or not.
Yeah, Tanner's had a good approach and been working in practice, working to get better on some of those areas that we've challenged him with. And again, I think the rotation, I like where it's at, but Tanner's done a really good job in practice.
And just the league as a whole, looking at this final standing last night, I think 7 teams had 8 or 9 conference losses. I just wonder if you could speak to what this league looked like this season, and just kind of the mismatch of, you got Purdue at the top and you guys in Minnesota at the bottom. Everybody else is just within a game or two of each other.
Yeah, it's always been bunched, right, Adam? I don't know necessarily how it compares to specifically to years past. You would know better than me, but I think it's always been pretty bunched, and the reality is they'll be what is Wisconsin, the 12 seed, and now they're NCAA tournament team. It's wild. It's just wild, and they've had a good year. Their win, I think, over Marquette at Marquette's a phenomenal win that's carried them. They've had a lot of really good wins, and then they obviously lost some games without Wall, but it just speaks to the depth of the league overall. I think, as I've said, it's the deepest league in the country. I mentioned on the radio show, I think since January 1, we've had 20 games, and 18 or 19 have been versus tournament teams. So it speaks to the depth of the league, and it doesn't surprise me that there's that level of bunched up teams.